Okay, you guys, if you were on the original live, I'm sorry. We had some issues, some technical difficulty, and hopefully you're able to join us now. We're just texting some people out to get this so that we can have folks join us. And hopefully we have some people watching soon. We are going to get started, though, in just a second. And it looks like we are live on YouTube, and I am going to be just putting this out here into a post for people to be able to see that. So again, I apologize if you guys were in the original anyways, we're going to be getting started in just a second. It looks like we've got one viewer. And so right. And okay, so all right. And again, just posting that out there. Looks like we've got some people starting to join us. And so I am going to share my screen here, and we're going to be talking about the market today. So we're going to be talking about rates, real estate, supply and demand, and really what what drives all these questions about what drives prices up, and also where buyers are at. I know people are concerned about interest rates and their costs of buying. If you guys have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we are happy to answer them. As well as we continue to go through this, we'll take sections out to answer our questions. And this is our first YouTube Live, so please bear with me as I get used to the software and add pieces in. So I'm just going to be Um, as you can see here, we've got real estate supply and demand. And when we talk about supply and demand, it's important to really understand where that comes from. So we have the number of people that are born every year. And back during that Generation X time frame, we had a big rush and baby boom. And so we had a lot of kids born, and we've been experiencing that in this housing crunch that we've had for several years. So the new one has been increased. So we've had very low inventory for many, many years. We've been talking about historical, long run of a seller's market. More than 10 years we've had a seller's market now, and that's never been seen before. But you can see why that's happened. Is we had a long run of children born, and the average age of the first-time homebuyer is between 33 and 34 years old. And so now those babies that were born have grown up, and they're starting to buy their first homes, and we don't have enough inventory in the United States of homes for them to be purchasing. And that's been going on for several years now. And part of the reason for that is we had a generally stabilized amount of homes being built for a long time. And then we had the crash in 2006. We had a decrease in homes being built for many years. And that didn't even start to pick back up until almost 2010. And we're just starting to normalize the amount of homes being built again. So this is an example. So we talked about active listings, active existing listings in the United States. Sorry, little tongue twister there. And so there's only about 33,000 listings available in the United States. We just had a consistent decrease since June of 2016. So we're talking about new housing supply. So every year we start to build about 1,700,000 new homes. And of those 1,700,000, only about 1,400,000 homes get built to completion, which leaves us with an actual deficit of 200,000 homes versus the number of households we have in the United States. Because we have, so we have 100,000 houses destroyed overall in the United States, and we also have household formation, new households, 1,400,000 households formed in the U.S. So, and then we have existing homes as well. So 900,000 existing homes. And of those 900,000 existing homes in inventory, that's homes that are being bought and sold, 600,000 of those are off market, and 300,000 of those are on the market sales. And so an off market sale would be between relatives or landlords and tenants, people that know each other, or for sale by owners. And again, we've got record low inventories. And this shows very low inventory back in 2021. I will say in our current region or in our specific market of the Pacific Northwest, we actually had a much higher inventory. We sold more homes in 2021 than we have in previous years. But we've also been experiencing something called a great relocation, where many people are moving out and around this market. So we have people, just a large influx in our community. So we did sell more houses in this specific community. However, these slides are nationwide and not independent market specific, because we are a team that covers multiple states. So again, this talks about the numbers of households, just to kind of re-emphasize that deficit. You've got 14 million more households and 3 million fewer houses. Again, emphasizing that we are lacking in inventory. So we have less inventory consistently year over year. Despite what is happening in the market as far as interest rates, it does end up driving up prices. And we're about to talk, as we lead into interest rates, we've been hearing changes in the Fed. So we've been having some frequent Fed rate hikes. It's also important to know that just because we have a Fed rate hike, it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to have an immediate change in mortgage interest rates, because a mortgage is over 15 or 30 years, and while you're not likely to hold that independent mortgage over that whole 30-year period, Fed changes their rates quarterly or monthly. They meet periodically throughout the year, and those rates do change very frequently. So there's multiple factors that go into what your mortgage rate is going to be. And when we talk about interest rates are used to control inflation. And so it's very important to understand. So back in 1972, so way back, we go back in the way back machine, then we had an interest rate of 7.5%. And we had a big run on inflation. I don't know if you guys watch any of those old 80s movies about people leaving the small towns and going to the big city and making a bunch of money on the stock market at Wall Street, with young Tom Cruise or those kinds of people in them. But that was in that 80s period where we ended up with a large amount of inflation, and then interest rates spiked, and we had some small periods of recession during that time, as well to drop. And so periodic during those recession periods, interest rates dropped, and then we had inflation, and then they used interest rates to control the inflation again. Then we ended up in a recession period, and then interest rates dropped. That's that cycle. During a recession, interest rates drop again. But during a time of high inflation, they use interest rates to control that inflation cycle. And so we got up to as high as a 18 or 19% interest rate in the early 80s, and then it trickled back down, so that by the late 80s, we were, early 90s, we were at about a 10% interest rate, and then we had another period of recession, and ended up with interest rates dropping again, down into the 7s. And you'll see here and then by the early 2000s, we were headed into the 7s and 6s. And then we had the 2008-2009 recession. We ended in between from 6% to 4, high 4s. And then we ended up trickling down to our historical low interest rates, which I know everybody has been very much enjoying their nearly free money. But when we talk about historical lows, you can see that this is really something that's never happened before. We've never seen this 2.75%, kind of incredibly low interest rates. So when we talk about interest rates coming up, like it went up to as high as a 7 last month. When we look at this historically, a 7 was a pretty moderate interest rate, not a high, not even a high interest rate, just a moderately normal interest rate. So now that we've come back down, and you're going to see in just a moment, into a 5% interest rate, and these were provided by Chris Burk of Finance of America. So that's where these slides came from, discussing interest rates, and we're going to see what rates were as of Monday. A 5% is still a pretty reasonable interest rate, and when you're purchasing, even at a 5% or a 6% interest rate, it's still a good investment. We get asked all the time, when is a good time to buy? And it's really about when is your right time to buy? When is it the right time in your life? Are you financially able to be purchasing? Have you created your nest egg in case of an emergency? Are you going to be in your job for long enough? Are you going to be moving in the near future? Have you created some stability for yourself? Those kinds of pieces, because housing markets stay strong through recessions. You can see here that despite these dark blue periods where those were times of recession, the housing market still increased at about an average of 4% year over year. We had an significant increase, then we had a downside slope. We had a correction, but if you mark these up year over year, housing prices have increased at a 4% increase in value. So, and this is the housing index. So we have independent markets, different markets, whether it's Seattle versus Kitsap County, Washington versus Oklahoma. Each of these have their own price per square foot, market prices. But that's why we look at the regional, the national index of house prices, which is what this white line shows, between 1960 to 2000, and how those home prices have continued to increase. So again, as we talk about rates that were, as of the beginning of this month, conventional to 20% down was at a 5.5%, and FHA 3.5% down was at a 5.125%. If you pair that with our Washington State down payment assistance loan, that did go up to a 6.3725. That turns that into a zero down loan with a higher percent interest rate. And then the zero down VA loan is at a 4.5% interest rate. So I again want to thank Chris Burk and Dave Jennings with Finance of America for these slides. Chris Burk's contact information is in the details of this live, as well as the contact information for Heather Hamilton, who runs our Owasso office out of Oklahoma. My contact information, again, I'm Ellisa Greer with the West Sound office out of Gig Harbor for the Peninsula of Washington State. And then Kathryn, Kleber, our managing broker out of our hub in Federal Way, Washington. If you have any questions, please feel free. Our cell phone numbers as well as our email addresses are in the descriptions, and we'd love to speak with you about your real estate and financing questions. Thanks so much. Have a wonderful day.